All right. I know our guest speaker well because I've known him since sixth grade. And after like 14 years of friendship, we eventually started dating and got married. He's going to share his story today, but a little bit of background about him is that he was a low-income first-generation college student who graduated with his bachelor's degree in sociology from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. And he'll share some more details about all of that himself. During his 22 years working for the Los Angeles Police Department, he has worked in various areas, and he's currently working as a detective with the FBI Gang Task Force. We are recording today's event, and if we happen to go a little bit past 12:50, sometimes we engage in dialogue, and you have to go. Feel free to log off. We understand you may have a class or another meeting to go to or work. Right now, I'm going to pass it on over to Denise, who will be providing some more information before Hugo starts sharing his story.
Thanks, Laura. I am Denise Aranda-Cedillos. I am one of the advisors for RAMP. And before our speaker's presentation, we want to share the purpose of Professional Spotlight, which is to invite an individual from a similar background as our participants to share their story, obstacles they overcame, perseverance tips, and advice for participants who are interested in their field. We strive to have various professions and backgrounds represented. This semester's Professional Spotlight speaker, like Laura mentioned, Hugo Ayon, is a first-generation college graduate, formerly low-income student, and male of color. We have invited him to speak of his experiences encompassing these identities. And while being an LAPD detective is one of his roles, he is not representing the organization or his employer at this event. We've had participants who are majoring in criminology and sociology express interest in joining law enforcement post-graduation, so we wanted to offer yet another career pathway for our participants to consider. Those of you who are interested in law enforcement as a career are welcome to request Hugo's contact information should you have additional field-specific questions. We understand that the history of policing and certain people, places, or experiences can cause triggers for individuals, and we respect that some students may not feel comfortable participating in this event, and you should not feel obligated to do so. We'll have another speaker in the spring, and we also have previous professional spotlights available on RAMP's YouTube page. On the other hand, if you are comfortable staying for this event, it can be an opportunity to share concerns with or ask questions of the speaker and engage in dialogue. Critical analyses and discourse is what we encourage from our students. We will have time for Q&A after the presentation, so please save your questions until then, at which point you'll be welcome to type your questions in the chat or raise your hand using the Zoom features. We also welcome feedback about who you'd like to invite for future professional spotlights, and we'll ask you to complete a survey that we'll provide a link to at the end. And seeing how it's midterm season, we also want to give a brief reminder that Cal Poly offers counseling and psychological services with a wide range of mental health services available free for students. The Broncos Care Center, located on the first floor of the marketplace, offers advocacy and support and housing, financial, food, clothing, hospitalization, and navigating resources. Additionally, the Poly Pantry is a free service for Cal Poly students experiencing food insecurity. If you want additional information or assistance connecting with any of these resources, any of the RAMP staff or tutors would be happy to help you. Without further ado, Hugo, thank you for joining us today, and we're excited to hear your story.
Okay, thank you, Denise. Thank you for having me here. I guess to start off a little bit about myself, 48 years old, married to, of course, Laura, which we've known each other since, like she mentioned earlier, since we were 11. We have 3 kids, 27, 17, and 15. One a graduate of Pomona College who now works at Cal Poly, and the other 2 are at Bishop Lamont. One's a senior and one's a junior. So I guess a little bit about my story. Born in Santa Monica, California, the oldest of 4, 3 boys and 1 girl, to immigrant parents from Mexico. both with, you know, elementary school education. Lived in East LA before eventually moving to La Puente when I was about maybe 7 or 8 years old. And that's pretty much where I grew up, did the majority of my living as a young kid. And it's funny how I kind of realized things as when Laura asked me to do this, and kind of start thinking about, you know, my story, and things you realize when you start writing things down and you start actually taking the time to think about it. But thinking about growing up and the emphasis that my mother put on education, and not necessarily just education, but the fact that she always stressed that I would go on to attend college. And, you know, where this woman came up with the idea of college and me attending college, I'll never know. Well, I guess I can know, because you know, this has prompted me now to kind of inquire where, you know, where she even came up with the idea, because she wasn't exposed to college or education. Amongst our family, I'm one of the older grandkids on my mother's side, and I'm the first one to go off to university, which some of my relatives didn't think was a good idea. We can get to that a little bit later. So that was just kind of one of the things that, as I prepared for this, one of the things I realized was where this woman came up with the concept of me attending college. So growing up in La Puente, elementary through high school, well, actually, let me back up a little bit. So during my junior high school years, right around the time that Laura and I met each other, my dad, who was a forklift driver, his company moved to Merced, California. Now, at the time, my mom was pregnant with my younger brother, and the plan was for us to move and follow my dad to Merced and move out of La Puente. Well, my brother was born, and then my mom kind of got cold feet about moving up to Merced and away from the rest of the family. So we stayed. And so my dad would drive back and forth every couple of weeks. And thinking about that now and how that changed the dynamic of the household, and it changed actually my relationship with my mother, because now at 11, I was kind of running the household with her. You know, I was responsible for helping her, you know, pay the bills, balance the checkbook, you know, writing out checks. And so, again, one of the things that I realized was that really kind of impacted our relationship and changed the dynamic, where, you know, she was no longer, I mean, she was still mom, technically, right? But now we were more kind of like an equal kind of level. So, you know, it just, one of the interesting things that I realized as I was writing things down. So back to my schooling in La Puente. Graduated from Bassett High School. And, you know, throughout my years there, I wouldn't say I wasn't a good student. My grades were decent. I think I got by. I was blessed with a little bit of intelligence, so I was able to get, you know, decent grades without putting in much effort. So, you know, I wasn't focused necessarily on my education. I was, you know, I enjoyed hanging out with my friends, and I enjoyed playing sports. As far as what I was going to do after graduation, my plan was actually to go into the service, and specifically the Marines. Didn't put a whole lot of thought into it. I thought they had the best uniforms. So that's how I made my decision. And, you know, I had a neighbor that I grew up with who had joined the Marines, and I figured I could go into the service and figure things out 4 years later, you know, as to what I was going to do as a career. And like I said, I was blessed with a little bit of intelligence, so I was good and I enjoyed the hard sciences. I enjoyed math, and I was good at it. So I figured, okay, well, maybe I'll maybe I'll be an architect, not really knowing anything about architecture. I think what I had in mind was more equivalent to engineering. But I remember getting called into our counselor's office, and he said, okay, well, what do you want to do? So, well, I want to be an architect. And he said, okay, well, apply to these schools, the Cal Polys, USC, and that was pretty much it. Didn't ask me really any other questions of, well, why are you interested in architecture? What do you think, what do you think it is? And so he gave me a couple of schools a few schools to apply to. And, I figured I would apply maybe, but, like I said, my plan was to go into the service. And if it wasn't for Laura, that probably would have happened. She was, we were really good friends growing up, and she was constantly reminding me about, turning in paperwork and deadlines, and would even, I think on a couple of occasions, filled out the FAFSA form and said, here, take this home, have your parents sign it, or fill this in. I don't know the information. So she was on top of me to fill out, the applications and constantly reminded me about deadlines. She still does now. So I went ahead and made filled out the applications and submitted the applications. And I only applied to two schools really. I applied to Cal Poly Pomona and Cal Poly SLO. Didn't want to apply to any UCs because that meant I had to write an essay, and I was not about writing. I'll come back to that a little later. So not really thinking I was, going to be a good candidate to get accepted. I kind of went about, my time and trying not to get into too much trouble. And the acceptance letters started coming to, people around school. And this is how little interest I had at the time. I got my acceptance letter from Cal Poly SLO, and just read from the envelope. It said Cal Poly, and I opened it and it said, congratulations, you're accepted Cal Poly. And I figured, okay, cool. I got accepted to Cal Poly Pomona. It's going to be a continuation of high school. I can still hang out with my friends, do the school thing during the week, and then hang out with my friends on the weekend, and still have nothing's going to change. It's going to be great. So I just kind of threw it on my desk. Well, maybe a week or so later, I get another letter from Cal Poly, this time Cal Poly Pomona. And I actually took the time to read this one, and it said that architecture was an impacted major at Cal Poly Pomona, and that it did not get accepted. So I'm like, well, if I didn't get accepted to Pomona, who's the other school? So I read the letter, and then, okay, San Luis Obispo. Well, yeah, I think that's in Orange County, right? Somewhere near San Juan Capistrano. And that's when I found out that it's 3 hours away. And then all of a sudden, I'm a little bit of a shock, to say the least. So go on to graduate from Bassett High School with not really any kind of understanding of what I'm going to get into in a couple of months, in a few months, when I head off to school. No study skills. I don't want to say poor, because I really I didn't know how to study. I didn't have any study skills. And head off to Cal Poly. Now, some of you may know, growing up in a Latino household, I'm the oldest and I'm a boy. So growing up in a traditional Latino household meant I did really not a whole lot growing up. Mom took care of everything, laundry, picking up after me, feeding me. So I was very dependent on my mother until I got to Cal Poly and I realized I didn't really know how to do anything. So that was a big shock and one of the things that I had to overcome. And along with that was being away from home for the first time, being in being up in San Luis Obispo, being an area that I probably, growing up, we didn't take any vacations, of course, didn't travel much. And so being in an environment that was foreign to me. I've told my kids the story. That's the first time leaving home that I actually felt like I was part of a minority group. Growing up in La Puente, it's a majority Latino community. So I wasn't used to seeing a lot of people that didn't look like me. So that was a bit of a challenge and something to having to kind of get used to. So there's a lot going on that first year, and a lot of challenges. Being homesick, of course, being in a foreign environment, being alone for the first time, having to kind of fend for myself and making decisions for myself, was very challenging. And then, of course, not being really prepared. Like I said, the high school I went to, unfortunately, didn't prepare me very well. Wasn't a very good school, and didn't have the resources that some of these other schools, had available to them. And it's not something that I was aware of until I got exposed to, people from other that went to schools with, more resources. Just for example, my roommate that I had came from a school in the Bay Area, and they actually had an architecture class in his high school. So he knew what architecture was when he decided that's what he wanted to major in. So, I just kind of went into it blindly. And after a couple of weeks of my first architecture class, I realized that was not going to happen. There was no way I was going to be able to, continue with that major. So realizing that, there's something else on top of all the other things that I was dealing with that first year. So I took it upon myself to change majors. And yeah, let me add, I ended up on academic probation after my first year because of that one intro architecture class that I took. So then there's added pressure to that, now you're, facing with possibly getting kicked out, and, not wanting to be there because I was homesick and just, there was a lot to deal with. Like I said, that first year. And actually there was that first quarter, we were on the quarter system back then. So moving on to, the following quarters, I decided to load up on my GEs to try to bring my grade point average up, and try to look for a new major. And kind of one day, just kind of looking through the course book, and came across sociology, and it had a criminal justice concentration. So I figured, okay, it seems kind of cool. Didn't really think about law enforcement as a career path. I figured, well, cool, sociology. Oh, they don't have a minimal GPA requirement to change majors into that major. So that'll work because if I wanted to switch over to engineering, I think I needed a minimum 3.0, and so I wasn't quite there. So I decided, okay, that's what I'll do. I'll get my grade point up, get my grade GPA up, and then I'll transfer it. So that's what I did. One of the other reasons, though, was, and I talked with Laura about this a couple of days ago, I think, was this pressure of having to graduate as quickly as possible, in order to get a job to help, my family financially. One of the things that happened just prior to graduation, or actually getting into high school, was, told you guys my dad had moved to Merced. Well, he was there for 3 years, so he moved back to La Puente my freshman year in high school, and it had become too much. So he figured, okay, I'll just move back and get a job. So he moved back and started applying for different jobs, and found out that he had a back injury that he didn't know about. So him finding a job became difficult. So my mom became, we became a single income household with my mom supporting the family. So, that added pressure for me, because all those years my dad, kept trying to get jobs, and he finally, there towards the end, before I graduated, did find a company that hired him despite the back injury. But like I said, that just added pressure for me to get done with school as quickly as possible, and to graduate, get a job, and contribute to the household. So I didn't have the luxury to explore different careers, or to say, hey, I'm just going to take a year off from school and travel, because there was not going to be that. It was get a job, preferably before you even graduate, and start working. So that was one of the other things, or one of the things that, kind of influenced me in switching majors. While at Cal Poly, I had to do an internship as part of my major, as part of my graduation requirements, and ended up getting an internship with the probation department, and did that for 3 quarters. And it was with a study skill, or a diversion program for at-risk youth, and found myself enjoying the work, enjoying working with the kids, and found myself getting more and more interested in the field of law enforcement. And at the end of my internship, the probation officer, who was kind of like the lead in that, took a liking to me, let me know that there was going to be some openings with the county working at the juvenile hall. So, and they were looking specifically for Spanish speakers. So I ended up applying, and lo and behold, I get hired. And right before, so I did my 4 years, and I still had maybe about 4 classes I needed to finish. So I was going to do kind of like 4.5 years. So it was going to be 4 years plus the fall quarter. Once I got hired, I had to drop all my classes because I ended up working full time. And then the following quarter, I went back and ended up taking, I think, like 16 units that last quarter, while working full time, while working 40 hours a week. So ended up graduating from Cal Poly, got my degree, and stayed there with the probation department for almost 2 years. after about 2 years, started getting a little homesick. I was up there alone. I'd been up there now for 6 years, and would come home every month or so to visit my family, and started getting a little homesick, and realized that my younger siblings, two youngest ones, actually, when I left for school, were in elementary school, and now they were in high school, and I had missed kind of a big chunk of their life. So started looking into coming back to the LA area, and got a phone call from one of my friends and said, "Hey, LA County Probation is hiring. If you're thinking about coming down." So ended up testing with him and interviewing with them, and then ended up getting a job offer, which I was not anticipating, because at the time I was doing really well with the probation department. I had just been selected for their house arrest unit, which was a new thing they had just put together, and had just recently been promoted. And I was doing well up there, so took a couple weeks to think about it before deciding, to accept the offer. And one of the factors in accepting that offer was that one coming down to LA, and two was I had decided that I did want to try and be a police officer. I figured if I came down to LA, that would make it a little easier for me. Now with more life experience and more work experience, that would make me a better candidate. So kind of with that idea in the back of my mind, I ended up accepting that job with LA County. And I was there for probably almost a year and a half before I applied with the LAPD and got accepted and got an academy date. And I started February 2000. Went on to do 7 months in the police academy before I got assigned my first assignment in Hollywood as a probationary officer. Did a year at Hollywood before transferring to Rampart Division, where I worked the majority of my career there, working to different assignments, patrol, bike unit, gangs, and then getting promoted to detective in 2014. Transferring then again to Newton Division, where I was there for a year as a detective before getting promoted again to sergeant, and then going to Wilshire Division, where I was there for a year. Now with the LAPD, they call it dual status. So I have status as a sergeant and as a detective, which kind of opens up the doors as far as job opportunities. So at the end of my year as a sergeant, I got the opportunity to go to Gang and Narcotics Division. I just had to revert back to detective. So I reverted back to detective and have been at Gang and Narcotics Division now for approximately 6 years. In my current assignment, I'm a task force officer with the FBI. So I get sworn in as a task force officer, and I have basically kind of like the same powers, investigative powers, arresting powers as an FBI agent. We work a number of different gangs within the city of Los Angeles and outside the city of Los Angeles. And we, they're long-term investigations that we prepare to file federally, mostly RICO cases, but then we'll help out the city of LA also with some of the state cases or things that are related to our investigation also. think that's it. I mean, if you guys want to go ahead and start with the Q&A, or is it too early?
You didn't talk more about your fright of writing.
Oh, I had that written down too. And okay, so I said I would get back to that, and I didn't. So when I get to Cal Poly, like I said, I didn't believe I wasn't a strong student, and it wasn't for, you know, it wasn't for a lack of intelligence. It was just I had never been taught how to study. I I didn't have any study skills. When I would study, I would lay in bed and try to read, and of course, within 5 minutes, I was asleep. So I developed. I don't want to call it a phobia because that's a little too strong of a word, but I did not have a whole lot of confidence in my writing ability. So, so picture this now. I'm trying to get through my last 3 or 4 years of school, whatever it was, without writing any term papers. So if I had, let's just say, an anthropology class where there were multiple sections, and it's the first week of school and I have my schedule laid out, and I would walk and said, okay, I'm going to pick this class. And I would walk into the class and I would sit in the rear right next to the door. And the professor would come in and he would hand out a syllabus and he would say, okay, we have a midterm, we have a final, and we have two papers you guys need to write, 5 to 6 pages each. I would get up and walk out and look for another section. I would go in, crash that section, same thing, sit in the back, right next to the door. And the professor would say, okay, we have a midterm final, both Scantrons, no papers. And I'd say, perfect, this class fits me. So that's how I would juggle my schedule, was trying to avoid writing papers. So now the ironic thing is I write for a living, and that's what I do. It's kind of a, twist of fate there. So all that time that I spent trying to avoid writing, now that's what I do for a living. Amongst a lot of other things, but and now I actually consider myself a pretty strong writer. The time that I was a detective, we call them table detectives. I'd read a lot of reports that I would get from officers for these different investigations that I would get signed, and I would compare some of the writing or some of the reports that I would get from some of these officers kind of to my own, and I'm like, well, I'm like, so now, which I think when I get asked sometimes about what can people do to prepare themselves for a career in law enforcement, is you need to be a strong writer, and that's like the one skill I can say would probably benefit you the most in a career in law enforcement, is being a strong writer. Did I miss anything else, Laura?
Not that I can think of right now. Christian, you can now moderate our Q&A.
Yes, sure. Yes, we could get started with the question and answers. If you feel more comfortable, well, first of all, thank you, Hugo, for sharing your story and the challenges and that you've overcome, from childhood up until now, overcoming the challenges throughout your schooling. You're saying not preparing you enough for college, also that pressure to provide for your family at a young age, and also that so I guess some of the aversion to writing and not feeling prepared to do that. Yeah, so thank you for sharing a lot of that. I think many of us could could uh, could could relate to what you mentioned, and I appreciate you sharing that. Now with the question and answers, I have a few, but if you for those of you who feel comfortable sharing, asking, you could go ahead and either raise your hand, or I'll notice you if you're trying to ask a question. You're also welcome to ask a question in the chat. Anybody would like to get us started with some? Okay, so I see a hand here. You could go ahead.
Looks like it's Elena.
Yes, I see Elena's hand. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Do you have any advice for students and kids going through what you were going through in school right now?
You know what? It's not as, it can seem overwhelming at the time. I definitely was overwhelmed and wanted to just go home so many times. But it gets easier. And it's one of the things where you'll look back years from now and be like, you know what? You come out a stronger, better person for the struggles. Those are the moments that you kind of look back and they make you who you are. And it's life. Nothing is easy and nothing's handed to you. Whatever's worth it is going to cost you hard work, and just believe in yourself. Just believe in yourself.
Okay, we have Laura raising your hand. Yes, and a few thumbs up. Okay. We have 2 people raising their hands. But we also have Samantha Ullman, so
So Lara, you want to go first and then Samantha?
yes.
Okay, that's fine. So we know that you came in went to college with some deficits. What would you say were some strengths that you took to college with you, or where you felt that you were well prepared, if anything?
Yeah. I think, geez, that's a good question. Well, I think, despite the fact that I was, a mama's boy, I think, having to help my mother run a household at a young age, I never really fell into the trap that a lot of young people fall into, as far as being careless with money and the credit cards and going crazy with that stuff. I was always careful, and I was always able to budget my finances, even though at times there wasn't a whole lot. I've always felt that was like an area, a strength of mine, being able to budget and kind of foresee and have a little nest egg, even though sometimes it was really, really small. That was definitely one of my areas that I think that one of my strengths. And then I think something also that happened was, so after that first quarter where I ended up on academic probation, and coming back, the next quarter for the winter quarter, and doing well in some of my classes, pulling some B's and an occasional A here and there, really added to my confidence. Like, okay, I belong here. I can do this. I'm not totally out of place. I belong. I have a place here. So that really helped.
Thank you. Now we have Samantha.
All right. Um, excuse my voice. But you mentioned that like you came in from a school that didn't prepare you much for college. And I had like a very similar experience. I came from a school that was like one hallway long with like 80 kids in my class and the same teachers throughout. And like I was not prepared whatsoever to come to like a school that was bigger than 300 kids and like a school that wasn't easy to navigate. Like my school is extremely easy to navigate. It was very easy to pass classes. It was almost too accommodating. And so I came to Cal Poly completely blind to everything. I didn't know that I would need help, honestly. I didn't realize that professors would not know your name. And just how were you able to kind of approach that and like become like accustomed to that? Because like I'm a fourth year and I'm still struggling sometimes with figuring out how to navigate like my way through a school with 27,000 kids.
Well, one of the things I'll say, you kind of have, you have a kind of an advantage that, or you've already taken advantage of resources that I didn't. You know, at the time, Cal Poly Slow, I'm sure had tons of resources for students, but I was either embarrassed or ashamed to take advantage of those resources and ask for help. So the mere fact that you're already involved with this program, you're already like kind of like a leg up on you know where I was back then. And that's one of the things I wish I would have been more comfortable with, is asking for help. Back then, it probably would have made you know, the transition, and it probably would have made you know, probably would have made my GPA a little higher. But I would say just say take advantage of the resources that are available to you through Cal Poly. And there's so much help out there for you guys now, for students in particular. You know, Laura and I have conversations quite often about all the different things that are available to students. So, you know, take advantage of those. So, you know, they're there to make sure that you succeed. You know, the more students succeed, the better the programs are able to, I guess, you know, the better the more resources they can offer. The more the students utilize these different programs, and the more students are successful, the more resources the school and these different programs, these academic programs, can get for the population.
Yeah, thank you so much.
No.
Yes, thank you. So we'll be closing our discussion shortly. We were due to end the event right now, but however, we have a few more questions. So we welcome students who are able to stay, you know, to stick along for more Q&A. But first, want to again thank Hugo for sharing your insight, your advice, your experience with us, and just for us to learn your trajectory. So I'm seeing a few applauses here. So for those who are not able to stick around, thank you for joining us. Denise just added our survey in the chat box. We invite you to complete that survey, please. And any feedbacks helps us for planning future events like this. Again, let's give our thanks to Hugo. All right. And we invite you to our future events, workshops. You can check us out at Ramp CPP on our webpage. You could view future events. For those who are sticking around, we'll continue the Q&A. I noticed Vanessa had her hand up, so we invite Vanessa if you still have a question.
Yes, thank you. I have a question. When you were at school, did you join like a community? Was that an option? Like not necessarily ramp, but did you have that option when you were going to school?
Well, when I was accepted into the Summer Institute, which is similar to Summer Bridge. So I did, I participated in that, which I think it was like 3 weeks during the summer, right before the fall semester or fall quarter, and made some connections with a few people from the LA area, that similar backgrounds, and situations as mine. So I did, kind of have like a small little community, and ended up making some good friends that I ended up, um, moving out with the following year, getting our own little apartment. But so I did have that. I wasn't totally isolated. And you know, you bring up that question about my community, and I don't think I've ever thought about that. And how fortunate I was to have that small little community. Because without that, I would have been, really, really lonely. And now, mind you, this was back before email. So I actually, Laura and I actually would exchange, I think, letters, handwritten letters through the mail back then. So it wasn't as easy to keep in touch with, my friends back here in LA. There were no cell phones, so we couldn't, if I had to call somebody, I had to call them at their house, their parents' house, more than likely. So, yeah, it was a little different. But yes, I did have like a small little community.
Thank you for sharing. Sometimes I feel cell phone is a curse and a blessing because everyone is like, why aren't you answering your phone? I'm like, there's just times I'm not available. So thank you.
Yes.
Wonderful. All right. We also have Denise has a question, and I also have a question after Denise.
Yeah, I have two questions. First, I want to say that letter is really sweet. It's like a rom-com, sending letters back and forth. I think that's a lost art. But my first question is, your role is so, I imagine, stressful. How do you handle stress and pressure that you might feel from your job, but also just in general?
Not very well, to be honest with you. You try to, we're a household with two full-time working parents. We have kids that have a ton of activities, and we have extended family also that we need help with. And my job, I'll be honest, my job isn't, or my profession isn't the easiest profession to work and to live with. Changing hours, changing days, not to mention all the other stuff that goes along with it. But we try to manage. We're very, very fortunate that we have our oldest Tiana with us. So she helps a tremendous amount. So it's almost kind of like having like a pseudo parent. So we're very fortunate that we have her. She's been a huge help. I know when she graduated from Pomona and was moving back home, I was like, hey, moving back home, really? We don't have enough room. But looking back on it, it's truly a blessing. We wouldn't have been able to get through a lot of the things that we deal with without her, because she's, we can count on her like no questions asked most of the time, and very, very blessed and thankful that she does. But dealing with stress is like I said, I don't know if I really have a good answer for that. I have my moments where it overwhelms me. I know sometimes we go to church on a regular basis, so that helps. And then sometimes I get home And if there's time, sometimes just sitting with Laura and decompressing for 10, 15 minutes, like, hey, how was your day? How was, tell me about your day. Or, because after sometimes a long day and then fighting traffic to get home for another hour and a half, and that, yeah, it can kind of wear on you. So, and like I said, so I don't have the answer for stress, but kind of like everybody, I just try to manage.
Yeah, thank you. It does take a village. And my second question is, you mentioned that going to Cal Poly Flow, was the first time that you felt like a minority. And I was wondering if you had that same experience entering law enforcement and like being first gen, what skills did you develop at Cal Flow, both being first gen and being a minority? And how did that help you when you entered your career? And also, I feel like first gen is a label that you carry throughout your life. So you're like a first gen student, and then you're like a first gen professional. So what skills helped you then, and what have you continued to develop in your growing career?
I didn't really feel like a minority entering the department, only because I'm, a large percentage of the department is Latino. So it's not, out of the ordinary to see, a lot of Latinos being officers. But then also, the majority of my career has been spent in Latino neighborhoods, Pico Union, Westlake, Echo Park. So, it would get to a point at work where when I would approach or have an interaction with somebody, Spanish would be the first thing that would come out of my mouth. And kind of relating to people that way. And the label of being a first generation college student, I don't know if I really recognized myself as being a first gen, even though I am. And I think one of the things that I take some pride in and satisfaction is that, I don't want to say it was because of me, but I think the fact that on my mother's side, I was the first grandchild to go to college and graduate, and I think it kind of set an example for some of the cousins that kind of came behind me, and I want to say like the younger half, many of them did end up going to college, and some even postgraduate work, and so. I don't know if it was because of me or not, but I hope that there was a little bit of influence watching, me go through that, and kind of, I guess maybe clearing a little bit of a path for them, and maybe not so much them, but their parents. Some of the older, more traditional, some of my older, more traditional relatives were aunts and uncles didn't see the need in the college education. They were just like, hey, you need to go work. We have a business. You need to work. You need to put your time in the business, and that's what you need to do. You don't have time for school. So hopefully, my experience kind of set the table for them or cleared a little bit of a path for them.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's a huge help having, it's a lot of responsibility and burden for the first person that does it, but having an elder like sibling or cousin or whatever does help the rest of the generation. Cool. Thanks for sharing.
All right. Do we have time for another question? I have one question. All right. My question is this: you talked about your trajectory, some of your challenges, and even currently, I'm curious, those in your profession, are there commonalities that you may share with others in your profession, like steps or paths that others took to get to where you're at now? And I guess my second part of this question is, what advice would you give students who are interested in going into this profession?
So to answer your first question, so traditionally, police departments were would recruit directly from the military because it was they would call it a quasi-military organization. There's rank, there's chain of command. So they would recruit heavily from the Marines, the Army, and from all the armed services. There's been a shift now towards hiring from moving away from the military, candidate more to college education or educated applicants. And that along brings a shift in the entire department also. You get a little, I think you get, nothing against the military guys, but you get, because I wanted to be one, you get people that are a little bit more well-rounded, maybe. You get different types of personalities or different type of personality. And there's plus and minuses with both. The military applicant and the college applicant. So that's one of the things that's been happening. I would say probably within the last maybe 10 years, where the department has moved away from that strict military preference. When I joined the department, I was working with guys that I would say the majority of the older generation were all, military veterans, Vietnam veterans, and it's kind of moved away from that a little bit. Although we still get quite a bit of military applicants and officers. A lot of war veterans. It's a little different now. And as far as my advice for anybody interested in law enforcement, I joined the department. I just turned 26, so I was a little bit more, a little bit of life experience, a little bit older, a little bit more. I don't want to say set my ways, but a little bit more defined as a person. There's the minimum age to apply is 20 and a half. And I've had conversations where I feel that's a little too young for me. For somebody to be a police officer, to be given that responsibility at 21 years of age, when you're not, you're still trying to figure out who you were or who you are. I think back at myself at 21 years of age, and had they given me, that responsibility, it probably would have ended up badly. So my advice would be, go to school, hone your writing skills as best as you can, and mature a little bit. That way, when if it is a career or a profession that you want to take on, that you're a little bit more mature and more sure of yourself than you are at 21.
Thank you for your responses and for sharing your insight and your advice and and the wisdom that you share with all of us. And it's very helpful for us, for advisors, for everybody at RAMP, to be able to share this with our students who are interested in this profession or related professions. So again, we appreciate your time, Hugo. I think this will bring our discussion to a close, unless Anybody else says otherwise? Laura, Dustin, Denise, we're good? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think so.
Thank you so
And
much.
there were
Yes.
no questions in the chat. Go ahead, Dustin.
Okay. Dustin, do you have any words you'd like to share before we head out?
No, I was just gonna say thank you so much, Hugo. We've been trying to convince Laura to get you in here for a while now, so we got you on the line, and just thank you for being so honest. I mean, even though we don't share professions, I share so much in your story of going to college as a first generation student, just that fear that can be paralyzing. And I think a lot of our students deal with that and they don't seek out help. I don't know if we're trying to be tough or you're trying not to look unintelligent, but it is a huge barrier. And I appreciate you being honest about it.
Yes. All right. Well, again, thank you. Thank you to everybody who attended. And a friendly reminder, if you can, check out the survey, fill that out. Again, this helps us for future events. Well, hopefully we get to see you again soon, Hugo, and hope you have a nice rest of your day. Thank you all for attending.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, everybody.